Viewers, events are moving very quickly as we head towards the United States presidential elections. But that's not what we are here to talk about with Professor M.D. Nalapat. Before I tell you the topic of the day, first allow me to welcome Professor Nalapat to our hangout. Professor Nalapat, namaskaram and welcome to P Guru's channel.
Thank you.
Professor Nalapat, we are seeing this new alliance sort of forming between China and some of the radical Islamic mindset countries, Pakistan, and then to some extent Turkey, and I don't know who else is in this unholy alliance. Now, you just look at their reaction to what has been happening in France. And I'm a little concerned that finally someone, a moderate like Macron, was forced to deal with this in a very effective manner. What is going on here? Who is behind all these things? And where do you see this thing end? Because nothing good can come out of it, especially when the rest of the Islamic world is not looking at China's own excesses against its own Muslim population, especially in Uyghurs.
Well, I'd like to say that the Chinese Communist Party, from the start, since 1949, from the start of the People's Republic, has focused on making China the center of gravity of global geopolitics. It was, the country was expanded and consolidated under Mao Zedong. The country was made into an economic a great power, and now it's a superpower, economic superpower, under Deng Xiaoping and his successors. Then Hu Jintao basically went ahead and started the process of indigenizing technologies, so that China can then compete with the West in the most advanced technologies. And now you have Xi Jinping, who is quite open about his view that so far as the continental landmass is concerned, we talk about geopolitics as being Mahan and Mackinder. Well, Mackinder focused on the land, Mahan on the sea. So Xi Jinping is focusing on the land through the Belt and Road Initiative, and on the seas through the Maritime Silk Route Initiative. So for them, I'd say the Chinese Communist Party, their cadres who have been groomed to develop into leadership positions, they have been steeped in history lessons of the European powers and the rise and fall of great powers, whether it be the Greeks, the Romans, the British, the Portuguese, the French, the Spanish, and now the Americans. So they have studied this in detail, and they have got a policy construct in which the only thing that counts is that does this particular measure that is being taken help China to become number one in a quicker possible time. That's the only thing, frankly, that is the criterion. Nothing else is the criterion, frankly. Whether it is Sri Iyer and Nalapat liking it or disliking it or anything else, the only criterion is, does this help China in its relentless race to be number one? And it is in this context I would like to say that this particular alliance that you're talking about, which, yes, is very much there, whether it's Turkey, whether it is in fact the GCC countries, and of course that indispensable ally of China, Pakistan. The Chinese have been extremely cozy with individuals who can only be described as Wahhabi. I do not call them Muslims because they don't represent the real philosophy of that great religion. They're Wahhabis. The Chinese have been very cozy with them, and they're giving them an enormous amount of assistance. In the case of Pakistan, they went so far as to block, for example, Masood Azhar. According to the Pakistan military, he's a philanthropist, and the only country that agreed with Pakistan, which regrettably was a veto-wielding P5 member who could block anything, any decision of the UN, was China. And China went along that for quite some time, until it became an expedient or absolutely necessary for it to move away from that. Look, let's not go into the old history. Let's not go into the history, even 50 years ago. Let's just go into George W. Bush. Today we got a Republican president. He was preceded by a Democratic president. Then you had George W. Bush, and he was preceded by a Democratic president. Of course, I must say that no president has done more for China for a long time than Jimmy Carter, after Jimmy Carter and Richard Nixon, than Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton, during his 10 years, did an awful lot for China. He made a lot of noise about China, but he did a lot for China. So don't let's look at what Bill Clinton is saying. Look at what he did, and the Chinese really had their head start during that period. But having said that, I'd like to say that George W. Bush came to power. It was evident by then that China was nearing the cusp of becoming a serious challenge to the United States. It was becoming very clear at that point in time. And even in terms of technology, etc., all that kind of thing that is happening, it was very clear the number of Chinese who were being sent to American universities. There was a degree of attrition. Some remained behind. Mostly a lot of people who were involved in advanced research remained behind. They used to go to China frequently, and then they used to come back and come back to their research. But there was a very, if I may say so, a very clear direction, a very clear policy framework to ensure that China becomes the future leader in the knowledge industry, technology, XYZ, as it has been in processing, manufacturing chains, etc. George W. Bush, like a laser, focused on China. You remember that a particular Chinese aircraft went too close to American surveillance aircraft, and that Chinese aircraft got the worst of it. The pilot died, and the American pilot had to bail out. And he landed his flight. He didn't bail out. He landed his flight, and of course, the Chinese had a good look at that particular aircraft. And after some time, they would have questioned the pilot. The pilot went, but China was front and center of the debate in the United States in the very early stages of George W. Bush's administration. Where was the Taliban, for example? The Taliban was being welcomed in Washington. I remember once visiting Washington when George W. Bush was president, and I was told, hey, a Taliban delegation is in town, and they're around, and they're going and meeting XYZ. XYZ are pretty influential people. So when I tried to say that, look, these are not the most moderate guys in town. No, we need them, we need them. And then again, the conversation would go back to China. The conversations all went back to China. And then what happened? I was watching a movie actually about 9/11 on that very indispensable, platform called Netflix. Indispensable, especially in this age of house arrest because of COVID. Yeah.
Is it 0.30?
No, it's net. It is something to do with 9/11.
Yeah. Oh, 9/11. Hurt Locker?
It is called 9/11, I think.
9/11. I see.
Something about 9/11. That's all I remember. I didn't remember the title. But I watched the movie because Lakshmi and I were in New York, not too far away. We were in the Lexington at that stage, which was owned by the Taj, if I remember, and the Lexington Hotel at Lexington Avenue subsequently became the Radisson, and then I don't know, it's probably changed its mind, or changed its name rather. But immediately after that, what happened? Nobody was talking about China at all. Nobody. The entire focus shifted back to Wahhabi terror. It went to Afghanistan. Bush completely took his eye off China. Bush completely took his eye off the China challenge. And it went back to Wahhabi terror. It went back to Afghanistan. Then, of course, Mr. Bush expanded his his war into Iraq. I mean, I personally, the only logical reason I can think for that is either he wanted to liberate the people of Iraq from Saddam Hussein, the dictator, was a great thing. Well, let's put it that way. He did that. But certainly taking his eye off Afghanistan was not a great idea. Just as handing over the responsibility for the Afghan, counter-offensive against the Taliban to the very country that was nourishing the Taliban, namely Pakistan, was also not a very smart idea. But what I'm saying, Sri, is that the entire focus changed. And after that, George W. Bush became very cozy with China because in United Nations resolutions, you needed China. The Chinese made all very helpful noises about fighting terrorism, fighting terror, fighting extremism. And of course, they refined all the methods that they have on all this in Xinjiang. And they have refined those methods to a very strong degree. I think, I think we are all aware of that. And they've done a pretty thorough job of it. May I only say that that came in very, very handy. The entire focus shifted. So today, what do we see in the world? Personally, the democracies, if you look at the Chinese, I mean, the Chinese mindset, I'd like to say I've gone there many times. I have interacted almost exclusively with people in the Communist Party because the Communist Party is everything in China. The whole of China basically is run by the Communist Party. If I come to the United States, I'll have to talk to the Democrats and the Republicans. If I go to Taiwan, I'll have to talk to the DPP and the KMT. I mean, I'll have to talk to independents in both countries. But if I go to China, if I talk to anyone other than somebody in the Communist Party, I'm essentially wasting my time because they're nowhere, in the mix. It's all the Communist Party. So the point is that, look, now today, what is happening in the world? Today, what's happening in the world is once again, the pendulum has swung in the direction of China. Once again, we are seeing in the Trump administration what we saw in the very pre-9/11 stage of the Bush administration, a laser-like focus on China and the threat that China is posing to American primacy. Of course, the situation, and then what do you see now? You see in the Middle East, you see all this, what is happening in the Middle East. You see, as you correctly said, what is happening in Europe. I mean, some of us predicted this, that this is going to happen. And unfortunately, whether it's France, whether it's Germany, to some extent, UK, other countries, they're all going to get this kind of access. They're all going to start multiplying. So, European society is going to be thrown into a really a serious situation as a consequence of what we are seeing, for example, play out in France. So you see that. You see Iran, what is happening in Iran. And I think, Saudi Arabia, there's a very strong effort inside Saudi Arabia, on the one hand, led by Mohammed bin Salman to de-Wahhabize Saudi Arabia, which I think is the right decision. Because if you continue Wahhabism, you basically are putting Saudi Arabia into a very deep, dark, slippery slope. It's a young country. The young need modern education. The young need a modern mindset. They need a moderate mindset. And they need that now. I think Mohammed bin Salman understands that. But as a consequence of that, the Wahhabi establishment is coalescing around the need to ensure that he is no longer, going to rule Saudi Arabia. Now, I mean, there were efforts at regime change in the past. Some of those who were, involved in those efforts met a somewhat unpleasant end. But I would only like to say, so far as Saudi Arabia is concerned, it's standard operating procedure that if you try and do something which affects almost existentially the king or the crown prince, well, that represents an existential threat to your existence if the Saudis ever find out. But then, of course, what happened? You have the entire Wahhabi lobby acting. And all the liberal countries in the world, they started talking about Mohammed bin Salman as an absolute ogre, And today, if I may say so, that particular Wahhabi lobby in the United States and in some other countries is very, very hopeful of Joe Biden coming And I'd like to say that I think Joe Biden will be a good president. I have absolutely, no opinion as to whether he is a good president or Donald Trump is a good president. That's for an American citizen to decide. I'm not an American citizen. I have no right to interfere in that process or to even give an opinion. But I'd simply like to say that in Saudi Arabia, in the anti-Mohammed bin Salman groups, so basically the groups that want Wahhabism back, they have a belief that the Biden administration is going to be helping them, quote unquote, against Mohammed bin Salman. I mean, the Kennedy administration helped in the case of Vietnam. And Kennedy, was part of the process in which the Vietnamese regime was changed and the military came in. I'm not saying the regime was terrible. It was not terrible. It was, but the regimes that came in were not very much better. But in the case of Mohammed bin Salman, this man is trying to de-Wahhabize, and he comes from a family that's been linked with the Wahhabis right from the last 300 years. So that's a major thing. And today, there's a perception in Saudi Arabia, let's wait till November 3, let's wait for Joe Biden, and then let's renew the push, clandestine and overt. And let's go and talk to the Lindsey Grahams of the world. The Lindsey Grahams, and if I may say so, sorry, go ahead.
Well, a couple of things that I wanted to add to what you just said. The contest is now sitting on a knife's edge. Very, very close contest, because a lot of stuff has happened in the last few days, and things are still changing. And unfortunately for Biden, things don't look that good. But I don't know how much the people are going to take cognizance of that. Second thing I wanted to say was, when you mentioned Lindsey Graham, his own Senate seat is in trouble right now, and they are not even sure that he would be able to get re-elected. And so is Mitch McConnell, believe it or not. So these are some of the stalwarts of this Republican Party, and they may end up not getting elected, and they may not be there in the Senate coming back. So here's an interesting question. Assume that Trump makes it, but he doesn't have a majority either in the Senate or in Congress. It's going to be a very interesting presidency, because then there's going to be all these pulls and counter pulls. I'm just looking at the crystal ball and giving you some inputs here, because Trump probably has a better chance of winning than some of these senators, because let's take a look at it. Mitch McConnell is 84. I mean, time for him to hang up his boots. And his wife, Elaine Chao, her family is related to some of the biggest people in Bank of China. So you cannot, suddenly wish all these things away. But as much as we say that Biden has Chinese links, so do the Republicans. So there is not much to choose between the two. It is just what you want to highlight and what you don't want to highlight. So anyway, I just wanted to tell you that this is a very interesting contest, and a lot of outcomes are possible. So please continue. I didn't mean to interrupt your train of thought.
I'd like to say that, possibly Lindsey Graham can turn to Ilhan Omar, because Ilhan Omar is also pro-Wahhabi, and Lindsey, she also clearly is not a fan of Mohammed bin Salman, and neither is Lindsey Graham. And so far as Mitch McConnell is concerned, Mitch McConnell is a good friend of the Russian defense industry, for the simple reason that Mitch McConnell is blocking sanctions on S-400. And unless you have sanctions on S-400, at least 6-7 countries are going to buy it, apart from Turkey. Now, it is Mitch McConnell, and with the help of Trump. Trump also, for some reason, has some kind of a bromance with Erdogan. And this is something, frankly, about Trump. The man is so completely unpredictable. On the one hand, I thought that this man was fighting Wahhabism. I mean, he has promoted, Mohammed bin Salman. He has certainly, done various other things, which basically were far from what the Wahhabis wanted. And on the other hand, the man embraces Turkey, and this is quite extraordinary. Turkey, Erdogan is now the leader, if I may say so, of the Wahhabis. Along with much more than Pakistan. So the problem about Trump. But I'd like to say, see, one my bottom line is very clear. If Trump gets elected, I hope there's a Democratic Senate and a Democratic House of Representatives. Because frankly, the United States runs best when you have checks and balances. And when you have one party and one president controlling everything, you have a problem. So if Trump gets elected, I certainly wish that there would be a Democratic Senate and a Democratic House of Representatives. A problem is going to come if you've got Joe Biden, Democratic Senate, Democratic House of Representatives. I think in 6 months' time, that's going to lead to a lot of problems and a lot of reactions. So I just wanted to, that my limited understanding of American politics. But yeah.
So I just wanted to add to what you said, that the United States sold, I believe, 1.5 billion worth of arms and ammunition to Qatar. See, Qatar is right in the middle of all this mix. So they also have gotten arms from America. So it is very difficult to understand which way this thing is going. So you're arming both sides. And then I don't know where Iran stands in all these developing equations. Iran was cozying up to China, but then I read that India now still continues to work with Iran in their Chabahar port, and that the United States is permitting India to do that. So can you please unravel what is happening around Iran for us, and then we can bring this hangout to a closure?
Well, Sri, I'd like to only point out that so far as Iran is concerned, India, I think, made a mistake in stopping buying Iranian oil, and we made a mistake in going in for S-400. We need modern American platforms. The Russians are now allied to the Chinese. We need to move away from their defense platforms, and we need to diversify into American platforms. Having the S-400 is no help at all. Now, if there had been sanctions on Turkey, it would have been a different matter. I don't think India would have gone ahead. But Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell have blocked sanctions on Turkey. And that, frankly, they have kicked a goal against the United States and the United States' own interests, as well as, frankly, the interests of developing ties with the major democracies such as India. So I only want to say that, yes, it's a little bit of a confusing policy. I mean, it's hard to say who's better or who's worse. But as I said, this is a decision left to the wisdom of the American people, and hopefully, they're going to come. The point I want to say is, the more there is tension and trouble in the Middle East, the more the whole thing becomes a fissile situation. Well, there will be more hope in China that, look, once again, like what happened with George W. Bush. George W. Bush started focusing on us, on China. And then suddenly he had to focus, on Wahhabism. Now, again, Donald Trump is focusing on us, on China. Well, if there is a problem in the Middle East, there's a problem in the Muslim countries, if there's a problem in Europe caused by certain groups there, small radical groups. Well, United States, even if they do not exclusively focus back on that, the way George W. Bush did, Bush completely took his eye off the ball. He made a cardinal mistake, frankly, of giving the arsonist the key to the fire engine, and then after that, the arsonist has been pouring petrol rather than water all over the place. And the second, big mistake he made was taking his eye off China and going in, and off Afghanistan, the Taliban, for example. But then, lo and behold, who is now the benefactor of the Taliban? If the Taliban were ever to get control of Afghanistan, I would recommend to them that they put up a gold statue of Donald Trump, because it is Donald Trump who has signed the peace agreement with them. So frankly, Sri, I don't know, who you guys are going to choose. Both of them have made the most horrible mistakes in their lives. But as so far as China is concerned, I can tell you, I am very clear. The Chinese, for some reason, don't want Donald Trump to win. That is absolutely clear. And the Russians, they want Donald Trump to win. So this is a divergence of opinion in this very strong alliance between Russia and China. The Russians would prefer Trump to win for some reason. And I think Erdogan has been saved by Putin, frankly. Putin must have given a smile or something, and then Trump, it would have reached Trump's heart. So Trump has not done sanctions on S-400. The Chinese want Biden, the Russians want Putin, and we have to wait and see whether the Russians will be happy or the Chinese will be happy.
Well, the answer to this question is what do the Americans want? That's what's going to tell us where America is headed. And as always, a pleasure having you on our Hangout, Professor Nalapad. Namaskar, and we'll be back with more interesting conversations like this. But don't go away because the next few weeks are going to be very interesting. You had something to say, sir.
I just want to say, God bless America, God bless India, and God bless our new partnership.
Yes, indeed. And there are some green shoots there too, which is very, very heartening to know. There's a lot of hard work that has been put via P Guru's Hangouts and also via articles that have been written by Professor Nalapad in Sunday Guardian and by me in P Gurus and some in Sunday Guardian too. So we'll wait and see how things go. Hopefully that's a win-win situation for the world. Let's see how it plays out. Now, viewers, I just wanted to add one little bit of information on that Hangout that I just concluded with Professor Nalapad, and that is as follows. See, China is now beginning to meddle more and more in the Middle East politics. And for them, the more the merrier. They are perhaps encouraging all these little countries such as Turkey, Qatar, and I don't know about Iran. Certainly, Iran has been tilting towards China, although the news that Chabahar is now again in play for India makes it a little bit more centrist in their position. So China has been encouraging all these little countries to keep fomenting trouble because they are hoping that Trump would not come back. And I don't think this kind of turbulence in Middle East is good because looking in the future, the one thing that they could claim as their own, that is their oil wealth, is becoming a non-issue thanks to a post-COVID scenario, which many people accuse that it was the Chinese who created it, or having not created it, but having discovered it, they did not warn people early enough that human-to-human transmission is definitely possible. So this is something that has to be looked at in the context of the United States presidential election. Thank you very much. Please subscribe to P Guru's channel and please donate to P Gurus. Once again, thanks for watching this program.